So welcome back to another episode on the Mitsubishi Evo project. So you've seen that the engine was stripped down in a few episodes ago and we was waiting for parts to come in. So obviously we've got the crankshaft in the box down here, which I'll pull out and show you for people who haven't seen it in the past. And also we was waiting for rods to come from America, another set of I-beams that we wanted to fit into the car while it was apart, because I wasn't happy with the I-beams that come out of the car. They had a bit of damage to the bearing surfaces and I just was not happy with it. So ARP studs are in there still. We're going to get to installing this crankshaft now. I'm going to show you why the rods ain't getting fitted to this engine, and we're going to be replacing them completely. Obviously we've got CP pistons and I-beam rods to go in this, and head studs, etc. So we're just going to basically get to building this up. You see it built up in the episodes last year, so there's no need to go through everything again. So basically this is just going to be me building the engine and getting the short block finished, and then we've got the head, just going to clean up the head, and then we're about to bolt that on. So I hope you enjoy it. So first off, all I'm going to do is get to cleaning up the block surface and any of the old gasket and that's on it, just to make sure that the engine's sanitary clean. So it's got to be spotlessly clean, nothing inside, no grit, nothing. So blow out all the airlines, going to get brake cleaner in there, and I'm going to do all this first before starting to measure out the bearing clearances, etc. So that's what I'm going to get onto now. I'm going to leave the studs in because they're all been taken out and I've ARP lubed them back up. So just going to get to thread tapping these holes, get rid of all this nasty sealant, and then we can get to building it back up. So you've seen them before in the last video, but the parts that we've got for the car, this is the brand new 4G64 crank for the stroker kit. Obviously this is the part number for it for Mitsubishi, brand spanking new. So we're going to clean up the journals because they come with like a wax coating over the top of them, you can see here. So we've got to get some brake cleaner and get rid of that nasty stuff off of there so we can actually measure the bearing specs and tolerances. Bearings we're going for ACL, obviously tried and trusted. I've used these a lot. King, Marla, ACL, great bearings. So these are the mains. They're in standard size, and these are the rods, and obviously these are the thrust washers. So we're going to get to measuring out these bearing oil clearances. So our top little tip here, just to stop you forgetting the bolt tightening sequences. If you're unfamiliar with different engines, just write down the numbers before you start tightening them up so you don't miss one. So obviously 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And they're all different for different engines, so obviously don't take these markings as your engine. Go out there and find your manufacturer's specs, manufacturer's handbook, workshop manual, whatever. And you just write them down with a bit of Sharpie. Makes them a lot easier because obviously there's 3 different stages of torques on this, so you want to go and make sure every single bolt is torqued up properly. It just saves you a headache in the future. Right, so now onto the connecting rods that we're going to be using with the car. Now obviously we had I-beams in there already. These are turbo tough I-beams. Obviously they're a few years old now, and you can clearly see in here over the time of the bearings that they've spun in this engine, and they've been reused, and obviously the bolts have been reused. It was just a no-brainer to go with a new set of rods. Now you can see inside there clearly, try and focus in quickly, that there was a bit of damage that I wasn't happy with from the last bearing that spun, obviously down to the low oil pressure issue. The actual crank, which I'll show you in a second, was destroyed on the big end bearings, not so much on the mains, just on the big ends, and you can see in there it's damaged. So what we've done is bit the bullet and went out and got another set of rods. So these are I-beam rods, exactly the same, but these are an updated version. So these are a lighter rod. So these are the same length, 5.905, and they're exactly the same for the stroker kit that we need. And we've also gone out and got matching bearings for them. So you can see here the recommended bearings for the ACL 4B1185H, and they're exactly the bearings that we got for the rod bearings as well. So you can see 4B1185H. So matching bearings, ACL race bearings for the matching rods. You can see all the rods have been weighed on each end, big end and the little end, and the weights are on there as well, 440 grams, total weight 625 grams. So everything's spec'd out exactly how we want them. So just going to unbox these now so you can see them side by side, because they're a slightly different rod compared to the older rod. This is the older style, and you'll see that there's some weight being saved on the big end, and it's a slightly different design up this end as well. The whole rod's been basically redesigned, and it's you can see in there obviously the bronze bushing that's been put in the little end. Just over time this starts to wear. There was no knocks from the little end or anything. These rods are actually good. But obviously down to the wear that's happened over the bearings spinning, there's a no-brainer just to replace them. So bit the bullet, these are the rods, let's unpackage them. Right, so let's get to unboxing these rods. So obviously you've just seen what rods we've gone for, and I'm just going to show you a comparison of them side by side now. So obviously we've got 4 brand new rods, that everything's been weighed out, so I can spec them with the pistons absolutely perfectly when I weigh the pistons. So you can see straight away they're a slightly different design to the ones out the old engine. So you can see there, the left-hand rods, they look a bit beefier actually. They do look a little bit beefier. But you can see here, on the side here, it looks like some material been taken off. Obviously that's allowed for a little bit of weight. I'm not really sure how many grams they are lighter, but they actually feel lighter. They definitely feel a lot lighter, which I'll weigh them obviously beforehand. Because I know these are 625 grams, but I'm not sure how much these ones weigh because they're an old design. And obviously now we're going to have fresh ARP bolts, because the bolts that have been in these rods, they've been torqued up a few times, and I've measured them and they haven't actually stretched, which is perfect. But, you know, go with extra precautions with these sort of power levels. These are 1,000 horsepower rated rods. Obviously, we're not going to be going to 1,000 horsepower. They're exactly the same length, obviously made for the stroker kit. So we're running obviously the 4G64 crank, which is a 2.4 crank. You can see here, obviously got the fresh bronze bearings inside the little end. And yeah, these are going to absolutely smash the target that we want. We want 700 horsepower on race fuel, which should be easily doable. We could have went out and bought H-beam rods, which would have done like 650, but there's no point because you're going to be pushing them right to the limits, and you've got the problem with they could snap, they could bend, and you don't want that. So gone out and got the I-beam rods, a little bit more expensive, but you can see they're a work of art. They are really engineered beautifully, really light rods for what the size of them, and I couldn't be happier really. So we're going to get the measuring of them now, put dial bore gauge inside, measure the bearings, etc. Get the oil clearances absolutely perfect to how I want them, and then I'll be able to choose what sort of oil grade that I want to use with the spec of bearing clearances that I'm using. So enjoy that. Right, so Manley have kindly included a data sheet that they put in with this connecting rods. Now you can see here, obviously the Pro series I-beam connecting rods. Now, in my opinion, they're one of the best rods that you can get for these engines. 4G63, 4G64. There's probably no better rod out there. I know you've obviously got the Carrillo and Arrow rods, and you know there's a ton out there, and people have got their own opinions. But I love these rods, and they're super strong. I'm yet to see any of them break or bend or whatever. And 1,000 horsepower rated. I mean, you're not going to do any more than that on a genuine dyno. I know Americans love to do wheel horsepower. They convert into fly horsepower and all sort of the weird stuff. But you know, genuine power, you're going to have to go to a billet block, any sort of power level after that. But you can see here they give you like a rough guide of what oil clearances they want for the rods. 2 to 3 far, which is quite large actually. You want like some sort of thick weight oil to be running that sort of gap. And yeah, so they literally got all the torque specs, everything here. There's nothing actually listed for them, but all I'll do is I'll match up the length of the bolt and the head of the bolt, etc. Because you can see it's like for the American market with the V8s, etc. So yeah, I'm gonna just measure these up now, start getting the clearances together so we can bolt these together. I'm not going to show you all that. I showed you all that in the previous videos. I think it was last year. So you're just going to see me basically bolting this together. But just be assured, all the clearances have been spec'd out with a micrometer, with a dial bore gauge, etc. And all the bearing oil clearances are perfect. So then I'll be able to pick an oil that I want to use for this engine, different weights of oil for different clearances, etc. So I'm going to get onto that now. Just an important reference point, it's nicely put here actually, which is going to help me explain it to you a bit more. So with the bolts, always measure them when they're brand new with a micrometer, just to show the length of the bolt before you even attempt to torque them up. They're allowing for 1 farad stretch on these bolts, and that's the same with the mains and the head bolts as well. And past that 1 farad, then it's past its like critical point of stretch and it will break. So always measure them before, then obviously torque them up, and you can pull them back apart if you want and measure for stretch, and that's how you're going to know. Now I've measured the ones that come out of the old rods, which are here, and they're absolutely fine. They haven't stretched at all. They're exactly the same as the brand new bolts, which is absolutely perfect. So we've got no stretch with them torque levels. So it's very important if you're building them to yourself. Obviously if you're firstly starting off, stretch of a bolt is so important. That's what's main failure of these rods. Well, after a ton of measurements, I've come with the oil clearances exactly that I want against all 4 rods, which is a little bit of work because I've had to move the shells around a ton of times. But I finally got there, so obviously we labelled 1 to 4, and I don't want to mix them up, so all the rods are labelled, the boxes are labelled, so I know the weights of the rods, and all the bearing shells are behind them, exactly in the order that I need to fit them, to give me the oil clearances that I want. So I'm just about to start attaching the pistons to the rods. Now the pistons that we're using is the same CP pistons we used before, and obviously I machined them out to make them matching and balanced, so you can just about see the CP sign in there, and there's the part code for it. So these are amazing pistons, very strong. They're going to go well with these rods, so about to get these onto the rods now. So there we go, the pistons are all mounted onto the brand new rods. We're ready to get these pistons in. Obviously got to get the bearings in first, and then we can just put these into the bores, slide them in. Obviously the rings have all been gapped previously, they don't need to be done. Everything's obviously, you ain't got to take none of that off, just got to clock them into their position. You can see pistons all nice and clean, brand new rods. It's going to be a nice strong build. Right, so there you go. You just watched me build up this short block for this Mitsubishi Evo engine. Obviously, this is a 2.37 stroker, and you can see how nicely it rotates. I was really happy with the oil clearances. They come out absolutely perfect when I messed around with the bearings, but literally with just like one finger on the ratchet, the whole assembly is turning, and it's turning really, really freely. So I'm really happy with the way that it's been built. All the specs and everything absolutely perfect. So if you're wondering what head gasket we're going to be using for the car, we've got the Cosworth head gasket. It's notoriously one of the best head gaskets for these engines. So we've got a good spec engine. We're going to be aiming for like 600 horsepower, something like that. We're going to put race fuel through it. It's going to be a really fun car to drive. Obviously we put on a dyno, the whole lot. It's going to be getting mapped on the road by one of the best tuners in the country, because we've got the Link G4 plus ECU. So it's a very nice spec engine. And it's going to be a very nice spec car. Obviously the car's got RS diff, RS gearbox, all sorts of goodies on it already, so it's going to be very enjoyable. Right, so there we have it. This is the engine all built up. I've just oiled up all the bores so it just keeps it rust free and everything. You can see obviously we've got the Cosworth head gasket that's going on there, and we also have Cosworth H11 head studs. If you haven't seen these before, we've got these to go on there as well, just to keep that head bolted down in place. And I'm really happy with how this engine spec'd up. It's spec'd up really, really well compared to last time. Last time it had a little bit of issues with the rod bearing clearances, but this time there was all four of them were absolutely bang on once I measured them up and changed the shells around a bit. I mean, you can see how easily it turns over. I can literally turn it over with one finger. So the engine is absolutely smooth as silk, no notchiness. Absolutely perfect. Really happy with how it's turned out. So if you enjoy watching these episodes and you want to comment in the comment section, let me know what you think. So if you enjoy these episodes of me just building up engines, you know, not a ton of talking, just me building, because obviously I need to get this done, then, you know, drop a comment, let me know. I'm sure you'll be pleased as I am of how the Evo's going to be back on the road very soon. We'll be able to get some driving footage, you know, take it dyno, get it road mapped, the old shebang. So thanks for watching this episode. No, it ain't your usual episodes that I normally do, but I thought it'd be a bit different, and we can get something up over the weekend for you boys. Hope you've been enjoying the regular uploads lately. I'm going to try and do that for the rest of the year. Join me in the next episode. Cosworth everything.